Back in 2002, I read an ad in the newspaper one day, and it was an advertisement for a position as a marker at North Coast Distance Education School, a K-12 public distance education school in Terrace, BC. See, we were not called teachers back then, but we were called markers because that really was what we did. Now keep in mind that when I took the position as a marker, I was a fully certified school teacher. I didn't realize at the time that this position was the start of my career as a distance educator. I marked a number of courses, including Spanish, composition, language arts, and physical education. At the time, markers were hired on contract, and so no union seniority was gained during the contract period. Distance education was still a print business back in 2002, and the correspondence model was fully implemented. So students mailed their coursework, which consisted of paper modules, textbooks, and some courses used cassette tapes and then later CDs. So really, the distance education model of 2002 fostered a one-way communication framework that really didn't support iterations needed for constructivist learning. And the kinds of interactions students experienced was minimal. For example, I picked up assignments that were submitted by students and I marked them. I made corrections to the assignments, wrote my comments on them, and sent them back to the students. But really, my comments fell on deaf ears because the students were on to the next assignment and perhaps didn't even read my comments. So I think my comments would have been too little, too late. At the time, rate of pay was based on how many assignments were marked. For example, I was paid $8 for marking a grade 9 Spanish paper and $12 for marking a grade 12 Spanish paper. So my check would range anywhere from $50 to $150 a month, depending on how productive my students were. So as you can see, distance education was not only failing students, but it was also failing my bank account. Luckily, I eventually got on full-time as a distance teacher and was paid a salary, and this would have been in 2006. So by this time, distance technologies were really starting to take off. We were using a content management system called First Class to organize online communities for students, and we were moving to Design to Learn, which of course is a learning management system. Once we had started to move online, we recognized a need for instructional design. But at the time, there was no time, actually, to develop online courses at the rate that they were needed. So, unfortunately, what many schools did was they uploaded their PDF print courses to the online platform. We were one of the few schools that didn't do this. We decided to make a much slower transition to accommodate the move from print to online so that students could succeed. Providing one-way communication via the internet was just not good enough. I was fortunate enough to be one of the first teachers at my school to develop and teach a fully online course. But this didn't happen until 2008. By this time, I was taking my Master's of Distance Education degree through Athabasca University because I wanted to learn more about instructional design and I wanted to get it right. I can tell you that getting it right was indeed a process of trial and error. I definitely made some multimedia mistakes, like not linking out to open in a new window or adding decorative images on a page, and a few others. But instructional design was a new field, and many of us made these mistakes. Now, today, if I was to define instructional design for K-12 teachers, I would first have to ask you some questions that really are at the root of instructional design. Also, in most cases, in a K-12 environment, you will be both instructional designer and teacher. The first question is, what theory or theories of learning do you ascribe to? The second question is, based on the theory or theories of learning, How will planned and intentional learning occur for your students? The third question is, based on the theory or theories of learning, what do you think would be your role as teacher? So let me start by answering my first question. I subscribe to a constructivist learning theory most of the time. As a learning resource teacher, I found behaviorist theory was more useful in some instances with some students. But most of the time, I would say I'm constructivist. And what this means is that I believe learners impose meaning on the world and so construct their own understanding based on their unique experiences. Let me then answer my second question based on this. I believe learning is a process, not a product, and therefore interaction is critical. So based on this, I will answer my third question. I believe my role as teacher is not to transmit knowledge, but to provide opportunities for students to make connections and construct their own knowledge. So let me tie this in with instructional design. And here is what is so important. You cannot design an effective learning environment until you understand and reflect on how learning happens. I believe learning is a process that happens as students interact. So whenever I design a course, I'm constantly reflecting on opportunities for interaction. Student to student, student to instructor, student to content, student to self, and even vicarious interaction is very important. So what does instructional design look like in the real K-12 world? I'm sure you're all asking, when will I have time to reflect and then design? Often teachers are too busy with the day-to-day classroom management tasks. But the reality is, you will need time to be an effective designer. Also, does this mean you have to become a media expert, know how to create websites with HTML coding? Most instructional design teams consist of multimedia experts, web publishers, copyright experts, accessibility experts, and content experts. K-12 instructional designers often have to take on all these roles. You will need to make time for reading and research so you're able to take on these tasks effectively. Fortunately, most LMSs do not require users to know HTML, and they are mostly user-friendly. You will need to familiarize yourself, though, with multimedia principles. Richard Mayer's 10 Principles of Multimedia Learning is a good place to start. In closing, I want to leave you with my 10 guidelines for effective online design for K-12 environments. Instructional design at the K-12 level is going to be challenging simply because you cannot be an expert in everything. One of the things that we need to see happen is we need to see instructional design teams developing for the K-12 environment and in a sustainable way.